I can't emphasize to everybody enough how much we need a different president. We need different federal policies. They have got to obey the rule of the law at the federal level, because as long as they have those incentives, people are going to keep pouring across this border. And so that's why we're standing in the gap and fighting as hard as we can fight.
My state, the home state of Texas, is taking the fight to the cartels. Yes, Texas is backed into a corner. On one side, our federal government is refusing to help the state secure its southern border with Mexico. And then on the other side, we've got our Texas DPS, our land commissioner, our Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, and others fighting the fight to try to protect America and Texas citizens. We've got Alejandro Mayorkas and the border czar, Kamala Harris. They've been completely useless in defending our country, despite taking the oath to do so. It is a complete dereliction of duty. Throw President Biden into that. He is just as much to blame. Further, we have the Biden administration suing Texas. Basically, this is the hypocrisy. This is the hypocrisy that we live with. The Biden administration is suing Texas for doing the job it refuses to do, and arresting migrants. It's refusing to do that. In fact, it doesn't want to arrest migrants. It wants to house them in your children's school. That's what the Biden administration wants to do. That's what the Democrats want to do. They want to take these migrants, these single male men that are coming across, a lot of them. No background checks. We don't even know who they are. We don't even know if they're criminals. We don't know if if they're pedophiles. We don't even know anything about them. We don't know if they are spies. We don't even know. But we're going to put them in the school gym. That's what they want to do. The cartels are trafficking drugs. There are terrorists among them, and humans that are coming into our country at rates previously not thought possible, over 300,000 in December alone. In fact, since Biden's been president, there have been so many people coming into our country illegally that it actually totals 17 of our states in the union. These people that come in, many of them, sure, we always hear, but there's good people. Yeah, of course, there's good and bad everywhere. There's good and bad everywhere. But many of them act with impunity. They have no respect for our country, our way of life. Didn't you see what was happening in New York, right? A little mob rush of migrants, not to steal food to feed their children, not blankets to keep warm, not sweaters for these rough winter months. No, Prada sunglasses, Prada and Gucci and everything else that you can imagine. That's what they were trying to steal. Big load of those, $5,300 or $5,500 worth of that before they were caught. Can't even believe they were caught. That was pretty amazing how quickly that happened. Never happens at the CVS or the Walmart or the Trader Joe's when they run out with the beer. Nope. But they got the Prada, and they got the guys who are nabbing the Gucci. That's always good. Well, most people would think about folding in this situation. Texans don't. We don't. We're not going to fold. We know when to fold them. We know when to hold them. What was that song, Kenny Rogers? Yeah, well, we're not folding. We're holding on. We're not going to quit. We're not bowing down in these tough circumstances. It's simply not in our DNA, folks. It's just not in our DNA. And you want me to be honest with you? It's not in your DNA. I know most Americans are not folding. They are standing up. You are speaking out. You are telling the world, and you are telling the Biden administration no more. You're really going to tell the Biden administration no more when President Trump is elected into office in November. I'm just throwing that out there. It's just a prediction. I have a fighter for Texas here on the Sarah Carter Show today, and she is going to tell you about how she was able to wrench back control of islands in the Rio Grande River from the cartel. I'm, of course, talking about Texas Land Commissioner Dawn Beckingham. She is a great patriot, and I can't wait to share my conversation with you But first, I want to talk to you about My Pillow. You all know Mike Lindell. I love Mike Lindell. I think he's great. He's never afraid to speak up. That's why I love him so much. He doesn't care what anybody thinks except you and how you sleep. That's what he cares about. So he has My Pillow. MyPillow.com is having the biggest bedding sale of the year right now. Get Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98, a set of pillowcases for $9.98, and rejuvenate your bed with the My Pillow mattress topper as low as $99.99. Visit MyPillow.com/Carter. That's CARTER, and enter code Carter, CARTER, at checkout for big discounts, including the Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98. Can't beat that. Go to MyPillow.com/Carter, code Carter. That's MyPillow.com/Carter, code Carter, or call 1-800-685-7221. I'm so grateful to have Dr. Dawn Buckingham on the show. She is the Texas Land Commissioner, a very, very vital and important job here in the state of Texas, and the first female land commissioner elected in Texas history. That's pretty amazing, Dr. Buckingham. That's pretty high title there and pretty high praise. State of Texas. You must really love that, especially now that you're battling the cartels. A woman with a Texas cowboy hat standing on the front lines of the drug cartels on the frontier, on the wild frontier of 2024 now.
No, you're exactly right. I love what I'm doing. Besides helping on the border, we of course funded education, help our veterans, do everything to help our coast and big disaster recovery, run the Alamo, do so many things. But I love doing what I'm doing. And it is, of course, an amazing honor to be the first woman land commissioner that Texas has had.
Well, let's talk a little bit about one of the big stories that really landed you on the map. And this was, I'd been down to the border on the front lines, both in Mexico and here in the state of Texas. And we have seen the horrors of the cartel battles in Mexico. But what was so astonishing was this island. And I'm glad my producers dubbed it Cartel Island. But because it really is. Explain a little bit about Cartel Island so all of our listeners understand what's going on there, and how Texas DPS, Texas Department of Public Safety, and you. I mean, it was pretty much your idea to take back the island, and so talk a little bit about Cartel Island first. Describe it to our listeners so that they understand what's going on here.
Well, thanks, Sarah. And I love how your team dubbed it Cartel Island. I'm going to use that for the future, but it's actually the third island that we have declared Texas, by our treaty from the middle of the 1800s. Anything north of the center of the river of the Rio Grande is, of course, Texas in the United States. One of the General Land Office's responsibilities is, of course, we're the official map keepers for the Texas. We determine the center of a river. So we got a request from DPS. Ironically, that request had actually been in for several years, almost a decade, not been able to get much movement. It took me 48 hours. I checked with my team. I said, let's be sure about the center of the waterway. Let's be sure we're on strong legal footing, and let's get her done. And so within 48 hours, we've declared these islands as Texas in the United States. It's critically important because before those islands were declared Texas, no law enforcement could step foot on them, which meant it was literally a law enforcement free zone that the cartels could do whatever they wanted. The first couple islands were small. Fronten Island, or as you say, Cartel Island, is 170 acres. That's a lot of territory. We found massive weapon caches, drugs, tons of human trafficking. They had built structures on it. Two rivaling cartels were actually nightly fighting for control of the island because it was such a sanctuary for them. So we took away that sanctuary, cleared it with the help, of course, of our state guard and our DPS officers. And then now we have cut all that human trafficking to zero on that island. We have taken it away as a safe space from the cartels, and it's just fun doing it. We're looking for more opportunities.
I think it's just astonishing that it had to take you and the Texas DPS all this time. The cartels are operating with impunity on this island, just wreaking havoc, fighting each other, moving in drugs, moving in ammunition, God only knows what else, of course, narcotics. And it took, you and Texas TPS to stop it. Now and the governor, of course, now we're looking at the border, and everyone across the country, and you're hearing it, you're seeing it right now in New York City. Just thousands upon thousands of illegal migrants. They're taking over now high school gyms, elementary schools. We saw that with the PS system in New York and the fight between the parents and the city to stop having migrants sleeping in their gymnasiums. Now it looks like we're back to the schools again. I don't know what it is about going after our children, but it's like we're paying tax dollars so that our kids can be educated and have a place to exercise in the winter, especially in the Northeast. And instead of giving them the gym, they're taking the gyms away from them and giving them to these illegal migrants. How come we cannot stop the flow at the border? Why is the state so restricted? I really want our listeners to understand this, because the state really is restricted when the federal government is like, hey, come on in. It's wide open. And then it's a battle between the state and the feds, even if federal law enforcement wants to stop it, right?
Well, you're exactly right. So, Article 4, Section 4 of our Constitution ensures that the federal government is going to keep the state safe and ensure a republic form of government. And when the U.S., when our federal government says, look, we are going to ignore all of our laws, we are going to allow everyone to walk across like a sieve, to the tune of 3.2 million people. Last year alone, 300,000 in Texas, an all-time monthly high in December alone. There's not a lot we can do about it, but what we are doing, Texas is dedicating billions of dollars every year. We're trying to stand in that gap. We're doing everything possible. We actually passed a new law that we're saying, look, we're going to take it, federal government, if you're not going to do it. So we passed a law. It should go into effect in March. Of course, the Biden administration is suing us over it, but basically it says we have the ability to detain these people coming across the border illegally, charge them with a misdemeanor, and if they don't go back home, then we can charge them with a felony. And it's going to be things like that that's going to slow it down. But you're exactly right. I can't emphasize to everybody enough how much we need a different president. We need different federal policies. They have got to obey the rule of the law at the federal level, because as long as they have those incentives, people are going to keep pouring across this border. And so that's why we're standing in the gap and fighting as hard as we can fight.
And that's SB4, everyone, to understand what's going on here. And we have to wait till March because there has to be that gap. You can't just go into it right away. And the thing is that even with SB4, and even though it's going to slow it down a bit, I mean, it's incumbent now upon the state of Texas. Now, state of Texas has to put people in jail. And guess what? Prosecutors have a very hard time putting people in jail when that person has absolutely no money. And then we've got to dip in, right? We got to dip in. I'm willing, use my taxpayer dollars, please, to enforce the law, not to house, because we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions. And I want people to understand this. From the moment someone comes in here illegally, right? Mm-hmm. You're looking at healthcare, medical, legal issues, coverage of, education if they have children, housing costs, food costs. And then you see Americans, like when I was in Chicago, veterans that are homeless, they might have mental illness, they might have drug addiction. We see people all on our streets, and our children, many people, good, hardworking Americans with their children, not even able to play in the parks because now the parks have been taken over by tent cities and migrant men who are whooping and hollering at the high school girls. And then parents are afraid of letting them out of the house. I talked to the parents. How do you put this into perspective? You're the Texas Land Commissioner. This is like the great battlefield. This is the front lines. How do you explain this to the rest of the country? Like, we're doing everything we can.
It is so frustrating, and there's so much to unpack in your comments and so many things to comment about. When I was in the Senate, in the Texas Senate, before I ran for land commissioner, I passed a camping ban bill because not only are the tent cities overtaking all the public places, making our parks unplayable, filling them with dirty needles, but you're talking about trafficked women who are right outside someone's back fence, who are yelling and crying all night and basically being raped, and the children inside the house are hearing it. The communities are unsafe. The next court date, my understanding, is the federal government is booking 6 years out. So at this point, if someone walks across, they make a claim, they get processed, they are handed full social services, my understanding, which includes a cell phone, and then they're told, come back for your court date in 6 years down the road. And in the meantime, they become this massive drag. They cannot work legally at this point. They are all owned by the cartels. There's so many things we've talked about in the last few months. One being the fact that when the cartels find if someone did somehow magically get across the border without them, they go and they execute them in the most violent of ways. We have found out that the federal government has stopped asking the Chinese migrants. And I remind everybody, you don't just walk out of China. If you walk out of China, it's with the express consent of your government. And here we are with these Chinese, and instead of being asked 50 questions, they're asked 5 and they're accelerated in. There are a lot of problems with that. We're seeing a massive flood of military-aged young men. We're seeing massive upticks in the numbers of terrorist most wanted lists coming across our border. I mean, it is a drain socially, economically, from our safety. I think we are going to have heck to pay for a very long time over these policies that Biden has straddled us with.
You brought up a couple of really explosively important issues. First, I want to talk about the women and children, which I think is vital. Both our children, which are facing an assault, a proxy war from our adversaries like China with the fentanyl all over our streets, 112,000 deaths last year plus. Those are what were documented. I think it's very low compared to what the number could actually be based on, the documented deaths and how they documented them. And the sale of women and children inside the United States under our very noses by these cartels and human traffickers, and what our own communities have to face. I want to start with that first, because I think that is close and that is dear to your heart. And thank you so much for pushing that no camping craziness. But because, by the way, let me just let everybody know that was happening in Austin when everybody's like, okay, people can camp out on the streets. And all the new people that moved to Austin were like, oh, we're so liberal. We love our immigrants and we're just going to let everybody camp wherever they want, until they started camping in front of their houses. And they were camping in front of their houses and dropping needles all over the streets, and havoc was everywhere. So everybody who had good intentions was like, oh, wait a minute, maybe this wasn't a good idea. We got to vote against this. And you were the one that led the charge on that.
Yes, and
that
it was actually
huge.
A bipartisan charge. I mean, we didn't get everybody, but we actually had some Democrats who walked across the aisle. And I'll never forget, the testimony in committee was amazing. I mean, I had Latina mothers come in and they say, I am a Latina. I have never voted for a Republican. I am never voting for another Democrat again. This is making my town unsafe. My children can't walk on the neighborhood. They can't play in their playground. This is completely unacceptable. So that's why it's so important for Republicans to communicate, in a positive way. Like, we really want safe communities.
Absolutely.
We want our children to be able to get an education and walk down the street. And by the way, taking a piece of public property and make it your own private property by putting a tent on it, which included the fact that no handicapped person could ride their wheelchair down the sidewalk because the sidewalk was so filled with tents. They couldn't even navigate it. It became inaccessible for our handicapped people. And then when you reverse forward, we hear so much about slavery right now and equity treatment. This border policy is the largest expanse of slavery that the world has ever seen. And I keep emphasizing that. Do not be confused. The men, women, and children who are coming across this border are 100% enslaved by the cartels and our most violent gangs. They're selling drugs, they're selling themselves, or they're selling their children. The number of young girls we find with the DNA of multiple men inside of them, the rape trees that we're seeing along the border, the massive expanse of our youth being exploited in that way, the number of perpetrators that we catch when you put somebody on a dark web. I mean, this is not everybody wants a better life, they want to move across. This is literally you're a slave, come in, have your life compromised forever, be compromised forever and work to have terrible things happen to you and your family. And we should just all stand up and say this is an unacceptable way to treat human beings.
Right. And being enslaved also by their own illegality, because now all of a sudden you're in a country where even if you're not seeing a judge for 6 years, you're afraid of even going to authorities or going to see anyone because you're just like, well, wait a minute. If I complain, if I say anything, then I'm going to be the one that's out in the open, and I'm more than likely going to be the one that's going to be deported. So now you're enslaved by your own illegality. So there's nothing good about this in any way, shape, or form, no matter how you look at it.
You're right.
And
They
you
are
brought up
robbed the American dream from the second they step across that border.
100%. That is such a good point. They are robbed from the American dream as soon as they step across the American border. You should have that put on a t-shirt because that is so true. That's so true. You brought up another really important point. You talk about how they've reduced the number of questions for the Chinese that are coming across the border. Now, we've seen an exponential increase in Chinese crossing the border, majority of which are military-aged males. My friend Michael Yan is in the Darien Gap. He writes me all the time, sends me videos all the time, and shows me these tent cities, a majority of which are Chinese military-age males. He's interviewing them as they're coming through the Darien. There's spies among these men. There are people in these groups that are coming into the United States that intend to do us harm. Talk a little bit about that threat. You're I love Texas. I love living in Texas now. I'm like, I could not get here fast enough. I've worked here for like 20 years. And then when I finally realized we could move here, my husband and I were like flying. We were running. We were just like, we need to go to Texas because we just love it so much. And I mean, this is really the front lines. And when you look at protecting America and you think to yourself, why is the federal government not as concerned at protecting this nation as I am and my other fellow Texans? Talk a little bit about that threat and what the pressure that puts on you.
Absolutely.
When you're looking at what's happening.
Well, if you look back historically, China, when the Communist Party took over, they had a 100-year plan about how to overtake and be the world dominant power. We are currently the world dominant power, and the first things they were going to do is take us technologically, undermine our society, and they have been operating according to this 100-year plan that was very published. It's nothing private. They have hoodwinked, I think, multiple generations of some of our federal officials. And when you look at that plan, I mean, shoot, it wasn't that long ago that they were flying a spy balloon over our country. I mean, they're of course actively spying on us. We know this. It is not. There's no new news here. Their current plan is no new news either. But the end of their plan is to get a military conflict and take us that way. And I just have to say, when I look at China's actions, I feel like they're following this plan that they set out almost 100 years ago, that they plan on starting conflict on our soil. You know, I worry that we are going to have domestic terrorist attacks based on what we're seeing coming across the border. The blood of the innocent Americans who die in those attacks will be squarely on Joe Biden and the Democrats' hands. It is their policies that have put our communities at risk, and it is not okay for our citizens to worry about, gosh, do I have to worry about going to this concert? Is something bad going to happen? Are we going to have a bomb go off? Are we going to have a mass shooting? You know, whatever it is. But when you let these people come across, when you defund your police, I mean, all of these policies basically create this unsafe environment that we have now. And it's just not right for our children who are growing up in this scary world as it is to make America scary. We are not supposed to be scary. We are the light of the world. We are supposed to lead the way in prosperity, in safety, in so many things, and they are bringing it all down.
You brought up a very good point. And when I was talking yesterday to the deputy mayor of Jerusalem in Israel, one of the issues that I asked her specifically was, you know, for the Israeli people, Israel, the establishment of Israel in and of itself was so that the Jewish people would have a homeland. a place that they could go and feel safe, where they wouldn't be persecuted by outside forces or, the pogroms, the Holocaust. All of this was lesson learned, right? It failed. The Jewish state did fail in that on October 7th. And she was like, yes. And we're going to have to come to terms with that after we take care of Hamas and everything else. We're going to have to face that as a nation. You brought up a really great point with America and the Biden administration. If a policy was failing and then they restructured that policy because they said, oh, we thought it was going to work, but it's not working, so let's restructure the policy, let's do something different, then you could say, yeah, they did their best, but they're restructuring it and now they're going to try something new. But when your policy is to leave the border wide open, when your policy is to effectively allow everybody in without vetting them, without protecting the American people, you're absolutely right. We're left vulnerable. We Americans are left in a state of vulnerability, and it's dangerous. And you made a point. Who they're going to pay? They're going to be responsible. But like I always say, will we be able to hold them accountable? All we can do is document who is going to be held accountable when this happens. And that's what infuriates me about this.
I think you
only the American people? I don't know.
No, I think you bring up an amazing point. And kind of, again, if you look at the Biden administration's policies coming into the Israeli conflict, they stopped enforcing the sanctions against Iran, which then gave them essentially hundreds of millions of dollars. If you look at recently, the Mexican president came up with hey, give us $20 billion spread throughout, Central and South America. Hey, get rid of all your sanctions against Venezuela, which we know is, of course, a terror sponsoring state, an adversary to ours. When you look at these policies, the Biden administration, both passively and actively through so many mechanisms, are making the entire world less safe. When you look at how we left Afghanistan, when you look at Ukraine, all these conflicts happen under Biden's watch, I think, as a result, in large part, due to either his active or inactive policies or active or inactive stances, which again is why we need another president. But you have to look beyond our nose and realize. But you're exactly right. Actually holding them accountable for the decisions they make is an incredibly difficult task.
I know it really is. And I think that was a big wake up call for the American people, especially when we saw what was happening from 2016 on. And I don't want to rehash the whole Russia hoax. I don't want to but everybody knows what we're talking about. And we're facing all of that now as 2024, November is really around the corner. We have a presidential election, probably, I would say, the most important in modern political history, because we are seeing a shift in our nation we've never seen before. I'm not going to ask you who you're supporting. I don't know if you're open about, if you've talked about it publicly.
I publicly endorse Trump, so I'm a Trump girl. But
yes.
But I think we have a really strong bench, and whichever Republican nominee will be fighting for him.
So let's talk about Trump, because I have too. And whoever becomes the nominee, I will support. But I have endorsed Trump. I think he is the only one that is going to be able to fix this issue that we're seeing across the board with corruption in Washington, D.C., as well as our border. I don't think there's anybody better. I've covered the border under many presidents, and he was the only one that meant what he said, and he did it. And he did it despite everything that was against him. What do you think needs to be done day one? You're watching it from the front lines. What does a president need to do day one when he comes into office to secure this border?
Well, it's a lot of the federal policies act as lures that bring people here. As long as people think they're going to be able to walk across the border and stay here and get everything handed to them for free, they're going to do that. Ironically, my family is in the middle of an immigration case. My daughter 2 years ago married somebody from another country, and we're going through the legal process. And a lot of people forget the tragedy of the folks who are coming here legally. because all their cases are completely delayed. Their ability to work, their ability to even immigrate, their ability to help their families. Those folks who are doing it the right way are almost punished by these current policies. And so we need a complete stop of those lures that are bringing people here, complete operational control of the border. We need to be sure that the people who came here illegally, there is not a path to citizenship. If there is, it's a very long, drawn out one. There's so many things that we need to change. And I think Trump did it. We saw all-time record lows under Trump. It's one of the reasons I'm supporting him. He was very clear on about what the policies are with the lures. I do think we need immigration reform. I think we can all agree on that. But we want people to come here legally, because it's only by coming here legally that, again, the reason they come, they're chasing that American dream. And if you take that American dream away from them out of the gate, where they'll never actually be eligible for it, they come in enslaved, they come in a terrible way, marginalized in the shadows of our society. That's not the way to do it. So I think Trump is fully capable. I will, of course, support whoever our Republican nominee is. I'll be out there loud and proud for whoever it is. I think we have an incredibly strong bench. I like everybody who's running. And so let's get her done and let's activate. But people really need to understand that these folks coming across the border are enslaved, marginalized, people who are on a tough way. And my heart goes out to them, but we need to bring people here legally.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's the only way to address this issue, and to be able to address all the problems that we've seen with regard to this issue, both the humanitarian crisis and the national security crisis. And there needs to be an extraordinary vetting for any president. It's going to be a heavy burden to carry on their shoulders come 2024 when we vote this guy out, who's just made a complete mess of everything. And and I keep telling everybody, it's President Biden's right there. He's on the front, but he's the puppet, because the same policies will happen if anybody votes in, even if it's Michelle Obama. It's the same policy. He's doing exactly what they want. So whoever comes in, we've got a lot of people here, like you said, that have come in here illegally, that have not been properly vetted, that could potentially pose a very serious national security risk to the United States. So we're going to have to kind of go through that and figure out who it is, and if those people are on any kind of terror watch list, or if they're connected in any way, shape, or form to Xi Jinping's government or to any other adversarial government. We need to say bye-bye if they don't have anything that they're willing to exchange in return, because we cannot put the American people at risk. I'm going to leave the last word for you. What is the advice that you would give not only to fellow Texans who are also on the front lines of this, but to the rest of the American public that is truly right now deliberating internally, I think, like what direction they need to take? Because even Democrats and independents right now, a lot of them are saying, I'm done with the Democrat Party. What do you say to one of them that can't maybe stomach a vote for Trump, or don't want to vote Republican? How do you change their mind? Tell me how I can get them to change their mind.
Well, I tell you what, I do have those conversations daily, being a Trump supporter. If I find someone who just can't vote for Trump, I remind them there's a vice president on that ballot. Maybe they can find enough love in their heart to vote for that vice presidential candidate. But the bottom line is, never harbor a broken spirit. We are America. We are proud. We work hard. We are all a country of immigrants. Don't be swayed by the propaganda. Don't be confused by what the media tells you. Think independently, look independently, close your eyes, and realize what is really right for the safety and economic prosperity of your communities, because it is slipping away with the Biden policies. And if we allow it to continue, we will lose our constitutional republic.
Yeah, do not give this extremist, radical, ideological, Marxist socialist mess in Washington, D.C. Do not give them another 4 years. They are a wolf in sheep's clothing. Their intention is to really dismantle this beautiful nation. And there are more of us than there are of them. So let's get out there and vote, and let's do the right thing and speak out. Thank you so much, Dr. Dawn Buckingham, for being on the show today. I appreciate you, Texas Land Commissioner. You are awesome. My gosh, I can see you just, moving your way up. I mean, maybe one day you'll be running for president. I don't know. I'm loving everything you had. I'm loving everything you had to say. So we need more people like you in Washington, trust me. But I'm sure Texas does not want to lose you at all. So thank you so much for being a part of the Sarah Carter Show. I really appreciate it. I hope you come back. Thank you so much, Commissioner Buckingham, for joining us today on the Sarah Carter Show. Thank you for fighting for the American people, for law and order, and for the great state of Texas. You are truly a treasure. Make sure you are subscribed to the Sarah Carter Show here on your favorite podcast app. It really does help. And by the way, leave those 5 stars and give us a full review. We love it. We appreciate you, and we read your reviews and we take your advice to heart. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for doing that, for all of you who have done that already. Follow me on Truth at Sarah Carter Official, on X at Sarah Carter DC, and on Instagram at S Carter DC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God help us and this November election by putting someone in office who actually gives a damn about the American people and our national security and human rights. And God bless the great state of Texas.